Fallout continues for platinum-selling singer David, now in police custody, arrested yesterday by the LAPD in connection with a gruesome murder of a 14-year-old girl who went missing in 2024.
David's music label, Interscope Records, is already distancing themselves from the controversy. KTLA's Lindsay Pena is live in the Hollywood Hills, where the singer was arrested. Lindsay.
Yeah, Cher, Micah, the house where David was staying right before his arrest, relatively quiet today, and we're still not sure who might be inside. What we do know is that David is in custody, being held without bail until at least Monday. Singer David's arrest late Thursday afternoon captured by TMZ, the 21-year-old taken into custody at a home in the Hollywood Hills. The California Post also releasing this footage showing officers in tactical gear handcuffing David before putting him inside a patrol vehicle. The musician, whose full name is David Burke, has been on LAPD's radar as a suspect for months in the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas, whose decomposing body was found in the trunk of David's Tesla last September. Although an investigative grand jury was convened in the case late last year, it never returned an indictment. At this point, it's unclear what finally prompted his arrest on suspicion of murder. KTLA legal analyst Allison Treasel.
Just because he's been arrested on suspicion of murder does not mean that on Monday he will be charged with murder. It means that he will either be brought to court and the district attorney will file charges at that point, or he will be released.
Rivas went missing from her Lake Elsinore home back in 2024. She allegedly met David on social media and, according to law enforcement sources, was in a romantic relationship with him. Treasel says what is clear is that investigators have spent months building their case, and Monday may be when we find out more about what evidence they have against David.
Including what type of forensic, digital, witness, information, all of that should become more available to the public on Monday.
David's defense team releasing a statement maintaining their client is innocent, saying the singer hasn't been charged with any crime. Quote, the actual evidence in this case will show that David Burke did not murder Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and he was not the cause of her death. Despite no official charges being filed yet, David's label Interscope already wiping his page off their site. Now, an attorney for Celeste Rivas' family telling us they plan to speak briefly on Monday after the DA makes their announcement. They issued a statement saying in part, quote, the family remembers Celeste as a daughter and sister whose loss has deeply affected those who knew and loved her. In learning of Burke's arrest, Celeste's father, Jesus Rivas, said, quote, thank God, justice for Celeste. We're reporting live from the Hollywood Hills. Lindsay Pena, KTLA 5 News.
Today, I am announcing the charges against David Anthony Burke, the musician known as David, spelled D4VD, in connection with the brutal and horrific murder of Celeste, a 14-year-old at that time. These charges include the most serious charges that a DA's office can bring. That is first-degree murder with special circumstances. The special circumstances being lying in wait, committing this crime for financial gain, or murdering a witness in an investigation. These special circumstances carry with it, along with the first-degree murder charge, a maximum sentence of life without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. The determination on whether or not the district attorney's office will seek the death penalty will be made at a later time. Specialized prosecutions, Mike Rimkunis, and the LAPD detectives on this case, Josh Byers and Corey Farrell. On April 23, 2025, as been alleged by the complaint, Celeste, a 14-year-old at that time, went to Mr. Burke's house in the Hollywood Hills. She was never heard from again. On September 8, 2025, as alleged in the complaint, Miss Celeste's remains, her dismembered and decomposed remains, were found in 2 bags inside of a front trunk of a car registered to Mr. Burke. In this particular case, as the evidence will come out in court, the witness to the investigation was Celeste. And the investigation was into the lewd and lascivious sexual acts committed by Mr. Burke that is the subject of count 2 of this complaint with Celeste while she was under 14 years old.
What makes you confident you can prove these allegations?
What makes us confident is the totality of the evidence. That in a situation where you don't have an eyewitness account, or we can't point to a video that shows the killer killing someone, you have to go through the very rigorous and thorough investigation to look at all the digital and forensic evidence. You have to speak with witnesses, often who are cooperative and some who are not cooperative, in order to obtain all the information necessary to decide who did what, when, how, and what their mental state was at the time. That is what we've been doing over the last, between September 8th, roughly, and today when we bring these charges on April 20th. The LAPD and the District Attorney's Office have worked in lockstep. There's been no disagreements. I had the chance to meet with some of the family members of Celeste, and their grief is incalculable as to what happened to their daughter. What they have demanded, what we have assured them that the District Attorney's Office, working with LAPD, would give them, is the proof beyond a reasonable doubt on who killed their daughter, on how their daughter was killed, when their daughter was killed, and bring that killer to justice. That killer that we have now charged is David Anthony Burke.
And we will have somebody hand you.
Josh, thank you very, very much.
Any comment on why the arrest?
Everybody, thank you.
Has she been missing 2024 or 2025?
Singer David, known for, among other things, his viral hit Romantic Homicide, appeared in court today. He's looking at murder charges. Prosecutors allege a teenage girl's dismembered body was found in the trunk of his Tesla last year. David pleaded not guilty. Fox 11's Rachel Aragon has more from the courthouse in downtown L.A.
On behalf of your client, do you waive formal reading of the complaint, advisement of rights, including armed forces and veterans' rights, enter a plea of not guilty, denying any and all special allegations, enhancements, and priors?
Yes, Your Honor.
Through his attorney, 21-year-old singer David pleading not guilty to murder in the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. This comes 7 months after a gruesome discovery of the teen's remains. Her body found dismembered and decomposed inside a Tesla at a Hollywood tow yard last September. The car registered to the entertainer's name.
No parent or any human being should have to endure what you've gone through.
Police and prosecutors describing this case as a parent's worst nightmare and revealing more about the two's alleged relationship leading up to the teen's death.
Ms. Rivas was a reported runaway from Riverside County. During the course of our investigation, detectives learned that she had been involved in a sexual relationship with Mr. Burke when she was a minor and he was an adult.
Prosecutors say she was last known to be alive on April 23, 2025, when she went to David's home in the Hollywood Hills at his invitation and was never seen again until her body was discovered about 4 months later.
A substantial amount of time that passed between her death and the discovery meant that crucial evidence had degraded or disappeared.
As to why it's taken more than half a year to bring forth charges.
In a situation where you don't have an eyewitness account, or we can't point to a video that shows the killer killing someone, you have to go through the very rigorous and thorough investigation to look at all the digital and forensic evidence.
David's legal team issued a statement last week after his arrest saying the actual evidence in this case will show David Burke did not murder Celeste and he was not the cause of her death. In downtown Los Angeles, I'm Rachel Aragon.
Well, from the beginning, this has been an unusual and high-profile case, especially given the amount of time it took to make an arrest and bring that murder charge. Fox 11's Laura Diaz spoke with a legal expert tonight. She joins us live from downtown L.A. with more on all this. Laura?
You know, Phil, at 8 o'clock we talked about the evidence. Now at 9, we're talking about what some regard as the unusual way the charges were filed today. The prosecutor alleged that Celeste Rivas was not only a victim, she was a witness to her own sexual abuse.
If he is in fact going to be charged, if not with the crime itself, at least with the conduct of having engaged in sexual lewd conduct with a minor, in this case a 14-year-old, you could make an argument once again that she wasn't just the victim, she was the victim and maybe along with that the witness, maybe the primary witness.
Our expert Stanley Goldman is a professor of evidence at Loyola Law School. We asked for his analysis just hours after singer David was charged with the first-degree murder and other counts in connection with the brutal killing of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez in a Los Angeles courtroom today. Now, prosecutors said that the teenager's body was found dismembered in the musician's towed Tesla. The DA said that the singer had a long-term sexual relationship with the underage girl and killed her to protect his career, dismembering her and leaving her body in his car. The singer has pleaded not guilty to all of those charges. He will remain in custody on no bail. The DA said that he was bringing the most serious charges he could, first-degree murder with special circumstances. They are lying in wait, committing the crime for financial gain, murdering a witness in an investigation, and they carry the death penalty. And it's important to note that in the state of California, sex with a child under 14 is child molestation, and that would affect this case, Phil. So all of these very important things to focus on as we look at this case, which has languished for months, but today had a very dramatic conclusion in court. Phil, back to you.
So I'm not quite clear on what the point Stan was making, Stan Goldman, about being the victim and the witness. I mean, in a sense, every victim is a witness to what happens to them, right?
Unless, of course, you've been murdered, then you're not alive to tell that story. It is sort of a nuanced approach, but it seemed as though the DA, because it appears he's trying to get those special circumstances, that he really offered up several scenarios where, in fact, David could be held accountable, including saying that he, in theory, according to the prosecutor, murdered a witness, that Celeste Rivas Hernandez was a witness to her own molestation, and because of that, she's no longer here to tell the story.
All right. Well, thank you for that analysis. We're obviously going to see how this all plays out going forward.
Begins in a place that felt ordinary, the kind of environment where nothing ever seems out of place, and everyone assumes tomorrow will look just like today. In that quiet rhythm of daily life, David Anthony Burke was known more for his growing presence and ambition than anything else. To some, he represented potential, a young man moving towards something bigger, building a name that people were just starting to recognize. But as often happens in stories like this, what people see on the surface rarely tells the full story. Not far from that same orbit was Celeste Rivas Hernandez, a teenager whose life was still unfolding, filled with the kind of everyday moments that don't seem significant until they suddenly stop. At first, nothing about her absence triggered immediate alarm. People go missing from routines all the time: missed calls, unanswered messages, delayed returns. It's easy to assume there's a simple explanation. But as hours turned into days, and days stretched into something heavier, the silence around her became harder to ignore. Family members started asking questions, retracing steps, holding on to small details that might explain where she had gone. Each unanswered question added weight to a growing sense that something wasn't right. At the same time, small, almost invisible threads were beginning to connect in ways no one fully understood yet. Names mentioned in passing, brief interactions that didn't seem important at the time, and quiet observations from people who didn't realize they were witnessing pieces of something much larger. Among those threads was a connection that would later become central to the entire investigation, though at this stage it was just another detail floating in a sea of uncertainty. What makes the beginning of a case like this so unsettling is how normal everything feels before the shift. There's no dramatic moment, no clear signal that something irreversible has happened. Just a slow realization that a life has stepped out of its usual pattern and isn't returning. And as that realization settles in, the search for answers begins, not just from authorities, but from everyone watching, wondering, and trying to make sense of what doesn't yet make sense. If you've ever followed a case where the truth feels just out of reach, where every small detail might matter, then you already understand how this starts. Stay with me as we go deeper into what unfolded next. And don't forget to subscribe, because the story is only just beginning and every piece matters. As the days stretched into weeks, the concern surrounding Celeste Rivas Hernandez's disappearance deepened into something far more urgent. What initially felt like a temporary absence was now being treated as a serious case, and investigators began working through the slow, careful process of reconstructing her last known movements. Every conversation she had, every place she visited, every person she interacted with, became a potential piece of a puzzle that was still missing its center. Friends were questioned, timelines were compared, and digital traces, messages, calls, and social activity started to form a clearer picture of her final days. It was within those details that one name began to surface more frequently than others: David Anthony Burke. At first, it didn't stand out as unusual. In any investigation, multiple names come up, and most lead nowhere. But as investigators dug deeper, the connection between him and Celeste became harder to dismiss as coincidence. There were indications that their paths had crossed more directly than initially assumed, and that raised new questions that demanded answers. Authorities began narrowing their focus, carefully examining Burke's movements and statements, comparing them against the timeline they were building. Each step forward brought a mix of clarity and confusion. Some details seemed to align, while others created gaps that couldn't easily be explained. It was the kind of investigation where progress didn't come in dramatic breakthroughs, but in small, steady shifts, each one bringing them closer to understanding what might have happened. Meanwhile, outside the investigation, awareness of the case was beginning to spread. What had once been a quiet search was now drawing attention, and with that attention came speculation. People began forming opinions based on limited information, trying to connect dots that were still being drawn. But for investigators, the focus remained on evidence, not assumptions. They knew that every detail mattered, and that rushing to conclusions could mean missing something critical. Then, just as the case seemed to be moving at a slow and uncertain pace, a development emerged that changed everything. It was the kind of moment that shifts an investigation from questions to urgency. Before we get into that turning point, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who follows real-life cases, because what happens next is where the story takes a direction no one was prepared for. The turning point in the case didn't arrive with noise or warning. It came quietly, through a discovery that forced everything into a new and far more serious light. What had once been treated as a missing person investigation involving Celeste Rivas Hernandez suddenly shifted into something investigators could no longer approach with uncertainty alone. Evidence had been found, evidence that demanded answers, and fast. The atmosphere around the case changed almost instantly, as the weight of what was unfolding became impossible to ignore. As authorities moved quickly to secure and analyze what had been uncovered, the timeline they had been building began to tighten. The pieces that once felt scattered were now starting to align in a way that pointed more directly toward one central figure: David Anthony Burke. Investigators revisited everything: earlier statements, movements, connections, and inconsistencies that may not have seemed significant before. Under this new lens, even the smallest detail carried meaning. The investigation intensified, interviews became more focused, forensic analysis more urgent, and every step was taken with the understanding that the case had entered a critical phase. For those following from the outside, the shift was both shocking and difficult to process. What had once been a story of disappearance was now something much heavier, something that raised questions not just about what happened, but about how it could have gone unnoticed for so long. Public attention grew rapidly. conversations spread across social platforms, with people trying to interpret the limited information available. Some believed the evidence pointed clearly in one direction, while others urged caution, reminding everyone that the full story had yet to be revealed. But despite the growing noise, investigators remained focused on facts, working to ensure that every conclusion was backed by solid evidence rather than assumption. This was the moment where everything changed, the point where the case could no longer return to what it once was. And as the investigation pushed forward, the next steps would bring consequences that would place David Anthony Burke at the center of it all. If you're following closely, now is the time to share this video, because the story is about to reach a stage where every detail carries even greater weight. When the arrest finally came, it didn't feel like the end of anything. It felt like the beginning of a much heavier chapter. After months of investigation, speculation, and mounting evidence, David Anthony Burke was taken into custody, and just like that, the case moved from uncertainty into the structured intensity of the courtroom. For many watching, there was an expectation that this moment would bring clarity, that it would answer the lingering questions surrounding what happened to Celeste Rivas Hernandez. But instead, it opened the door to even more complexity. Inside the legal process, everything slowed down. What had once been rapid developments and urgent investigation now became careful arguments, documented evidence, and opposing narratives. Prosecutors began laying out their case step by step, presenting what they believed to be a clear sequence of events built from the evidence gathered over time. Each detail was introduced with purpose, designed to form a narrative that pointed toward responsibility. At the same time, the defense pushed back, challenging those interpretations, questioning the reliability of certain findings, and emphasizing that not everything was as straightforward as it might seem. For those following the case, it became increasingly difficult to separate fact from interpretation. Every hearing brought new information, but also new uncertainty. Some details seemed to strengthen the case, while others raised doubts or left room for alternative explanations. It was a reminder that in situations like this, the truth isn't always presented all at once. It's revealed slowly, through a process that requires patience and careful consideration. Public reaction continued to grow, with opinions forming on both sides. Some believed the evidence spoke clearly, while others remained cautious, aware that the full picture had yet to emerge. And in the middle of it all stood Burke, now facing charges that could shape the rest of his life, depending on how the case unfolds. If you've made it this far into the story, don't forget to like and subscribe, because as the courtroom battle continues, the next phase of this case will bring even more developments that could change everything once again. As the case continues to unfold, it leaves behind more than just a timeline of events. It leaves a lasting impact on everyone connected to it. What began with the disappearance of Celeste Rivas Hernandez has now grown into a complex legal battle, one that still has no final resolution. For her family, the focus remains on seeking justice and holding on to the memory of a life that ended far too soon. Every court date, every new detail, carries emotional weight, a reminder that behind the headlines is a real person whose absence is felt every single day. At the center of it all is David Anthony Burke, whose future now depends on the outcome of a process that is still ongoing. With a not guilty plea entered, the case moves forward under the principle that every claim must be proven, every piece of evidence carefully examined. It's a process designed to uncover the truth, but it's also one that takes time. Time that can feel endless for those waiting for answers. Beyond the courtroom, the story has sparked wider conversations. People are asking how something like this could happen, whether there were warning signs that were missed, and what could be done to prevent similar situations in the future. It's a reflection of how cases like this extend far beyond the individuals directly involved, influencing how communities think about safety, trust, and awareness. And yet, despite all the discussion, one truth remains: the full story has not been completely revealed. Until a verdict is reached, There will always be uncertainty, always be questions that linger just beneath the surface. That's what makes this case so difficult to process. It doesn't offer easy answers or clear conclusions, at least not yet. As we step back from the details, what we're left with is a reminder of how quickly reality can shift, how ordinary moments can give way to something unimaginable. If this story made you think, if it made you question or reflect, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Because staying informed, asking questions, and paying attention, those are the things that keep stories like this from being forgotten.